Oh, I guess we're on. Welcome back, everyone. um, so I am excited today to be here with Zeneca. I'm filling in for Chad today while he's at the airport. But welcome back, everybody, to the CPG Accelerator. This week, we're having one of our amazing interviews. To talk about like brand building, Web3 community building at large. I've got a few slides here, joined by our friend Zeneca. And I will, let me bring these slides up here real quick. But yeah, we're going to go through a quick little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to jump right in. If you are following along live, you can leave comments and we will get them wherever you're watching them, but you can also hit us up in the Telegram if you have a question over there. And we will try to get to them as early as possible in the talk. So we'll talk to you shortly. But just to catch you up on what's coming up later this week, on Thursday, we have our L'Oreal office hours. So we're going to be talking about beauty tech and innovation. And that's that's this Thursday at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Sorry, guys. 9 a.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Central. European time. So it is a private Zoom session. So just in case you don't know, make sure you check the Telegram to get the actual link as it comes up. Next week, we are barreling towards Pitch Week. And so we will have our first talk on Monday with Raf on fundraising, investor pipelines, and TAM, and ultimately like how to put together your round. This will be hosted in Telegram, I believe. And then later that week, in the week, we're going to have an innovation talk with the Craft Nouveau folks. That's on Halloween at 11 a.m. Pacific time, followed by later the Thursday after, just in case you want to keep track, office hours with our good friend Montana Wang. Montana Wang, he is an expert at all things blockchain. So absolutely, if you have questions or technical things that you want to dive into, he's an amazing resource for you to chat with. After that, though, we will be in Pitch Week, right? So November 7th will be our pitch practice. It is a chance for you to come ready with your pitch, get feedback, and then ultimately the week after that will be Pitch Week itself, right? So our presentations, your recorded presentations will be played to investors. You'll have an opportunity to probably field like one question depending on the turnout. But it's all happening very soon, very fast, and it's going to be a busy couple of weeks. So I hope you're all ready. By the way, just one little bit of feedback for Pitch Week itself. Anyone can pitch. It doesn't matter what stage you're at, really. It is a good chance to get feedback, and it's a wonderful resource to hear what investors think and how they react to the things that you're putting, the products you're building, the markets you're going after. We do have many active investors that will be here. That will include Altitude, Fabric Ventures, Spartan Labs, Variant Fund, and Color Capital, of course, Chris and Jamie's fund as well. There is a link that will be featured. You can find it in the Telegram as well if you want to make sure to get your application in. So do that soon. Don't look at that, guys. So we're going to do that later. But until then, I'm joined today by someone who really shouldn't need an introduction if you've been in this space at all. But Zeneca, it is a pleasure to be here. This is my second chance getting to interview you, so I have a whole new set of annoying questions to ask you. But before we dive into that, just for anyone who isn't familiar, hasn't like gotten to know you yet, can you share a little bit about your background, some of the work you've been doing, and obviously some of the projects that you have been cultivating in the last few years here in Web3 and at large?
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me, first of all. So my background, before crypto Web3, I was a professional poker player for about 15, 16 odd years. So 2005 to 2021, basically, that's basically all I did. I sort of first came into crypto a little bit in 2017, I think, like a lot of people in that 2018 anon bear market. I didn't have that conviction, so I left and went back to poker and didn't really come back in until 2021, when I started to hear about what was happening in the crypto space again, and all of a sudden there was all this stuff you could do, DeFi and NFTs, and L2s, and all of a sudden it seemed like, oh, you can do things with crypto now. And basically, I got hooked. I was very, I have a very addictive personality. So as soon as I get hooked with something, I get obsessed, and I like try and learn as much as I can, and read as much as I can. And that was like the descent down the rabbit hole that I've been falling down ever since then. I spent a lot of 21 sort of trading NFTs specifically, bouncing around, and then finally trading NFTs, which was fun and exciting, but sort of very led to burnout, and very difficult to like maintain that level of attention just on the trading side of things. It was also not particularly fulfilling, I think, at the end of the day. At some point during 21, I started creating content. I started a newsletter. I started writing Twitter threads, and it sort of like resonated with the community, I think, and kind of all blew up. And I realized, hey, this is kind of great. I like doing it. People seem to like the content. Maybe I can double down on this and lean more into it, which led me to launch Zen Academy and the 333 Club in November 2021. These are two communities that I still run today, all with a focus on teaching people, just teaching people. The focus of the community is like education, and it's everything from what is an NFT and getting into the space, but then also things for like founders and how to run your own company and project. And we've sort of expanded as the years have gone on, but the community has always been focused around education and learning. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I've done a lot of other things. I've been an advisor for a bunch of projects, and tried a couple other things along the way, but that's like the quick version.
Well, that's quite a journey. I mean, the one thing I love about Web3 is like the kinds of people in it are from everywhere, right? Like it doesn't matter
crazy.
if you were an entrepreneur, if you were an accountant, you were whatever. There's just every kind of person here, and I think that that's an important aspect of, I think, what holds it together, right? In a lot of ways. For today's chat, I've been, rethinking and just sort of like refactoring my thoughts around Web3 as, the past few years now being in sort of like this bear market and seeing so many people leave and come and go, et cetera. And when I look back, I use this, I got this, I guess this framework, much like you, the 333, I like alliteration. So I've got the 5 C's of Web3. And we're going to take a little chance to try maybe visit each of these topics a little bit today, right? And so the 5 C's to me are community, culture, code, coins, and collectibles, all right? And let's start with community. I know you're like, my wife is actually a community strategist, and I know how hard it is to like actually be successful at growing a community and holding it together. It's certainly not an easy task. And so mastering it in these times, especially with all this turbulence, I think is really a trait, a token of your success all on its own. But, looking back on this roller coaster over the last like few years, what do you think are the elements that like contributed to your success, in building such a dedicated community? And when I say that, and what I mean by that is really that a lot of these communities fell apart, yours didn't, right? So like, what's the secret log here of things that we should be thinking about and doing?
Yeah. I think a large part of community is just showing up and like being there consistently. And so I think a big part of the reason that a lot of other communities have failed and faltered since 2021 is that the team stopped showing up, the community stopped showing up for various reasons. And so you have to give people a reason to want to show up and continue to sort of connect with one another, because community is really, it's not about me, it's not about my content, it's not about any individual person. It's like I could, I have followers on Twitter, I have newsletter subscribers, and that's an audience. It's when you can get those people talking to each other and connecting and sharing common interests and ideas, that's when a community actually builds and grows. And so I think it was attracting people with attracting people that had a central interest and were like-minded, and that's where like the education piece really came into play. And also making sure to not overpromise, not hype things into oblivion, be very reasonable and real with people. I always say that I didn't actually do anything special. I just told the truth and managed expectations, but the bar was set so ridiculously low in 2021 and still is in crypto. If you're not a scammer, if you're not a rugger, if you're not a hype man, if you just talk to people as if they're human beings and explain things in a logical, rational, slow easy to understand manner, that will attract a lot of people, because that's the majority of people in the world, I'm sort of convinced. And it's easy to get distracted, I think, by the loud minority, the people that are hyping things up and engagement farming, and to think that that is what's necessary. But to me, it was really just about connecting on the human level, and again, showing up consistently.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, I guess, because I used to work with quite a number of creators, and a lot of them didn't want a community, right?
Mm.
Because it was like so much work, right?
It is
Like,
a lot of work.
right? Like compared
Yeah.
to like just making content and pushing it out to an audience, which is certainly its own set of challenges and a tremendous amount of work, but trying to hold together an entire ecosystem of people. And, I know I appreciate that you say it's not about you, but there's a lot of it that is about you, right? Because the reality is that you still need leaders within a community, right? Like to
Yeah.
curate sort of like the sentiment and the emotion and the state of things. And ultimately, you need a community to help filter out people. I guess, like when we look at Web3 now, though, right? Greg from Late Checkout, one of our mentors here at CPG, you know, he's pro community, all community, right? There's a community led movement, even in the startup space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, do you imagine, or can you imagine Web3 projects being successful without community? Because maybe sometimes we take it for granted now, right? Like that, oh, everyone has a community. But I think to your point, a lot of times maybe you have an audience or sometimes you have customers. That's not necessarily a community. Do you think a Web3 project, though, I'm a brand, I'm a founder, should I be starting with the community? Like, or should I be sort of like, see if that works later on?
It depends. Something you said just before about it's really hard to build a community and to maintain it, and I could not agree more with that. It's tremendously difficult, especially I think in Web3. It's arguably even harder because you have community members who also have a financial interest in a thing, but they're not actual investors, and it's all speculative. And so I advise people to really think hard about if they actually want to build and manage and maintain and sustain a community, because it's really a double-edged sword. When things are going well, that can be like the highlight of your company or your project. But if things are not going well, it can also be your Achilles heel or greatest weakness. And it's a tremendous amount of time involved. So I don't think every Web3 project or every company needs a community. I think if anything, the opposite is a little more true, where it's a lot of projects that have tried to build one probably better off without a community or without spending so much time and resources into cultivating a community, because it's not central to their core mission or what they're trying to do as a company.
Right.
And yeah, you just generally be better off trying to build a sustainable business and then see if you can build a community around it.
That's actually refreshing to hear, because like I feel like all the maxis would just be like, no, you have to do that. But I think you're absolutely
honestly,
right.
Sorry to interrupt, but like
Yeah.
that was probably me go back 18 months, 2 years ago, because I really did have this high conviction that community was so central to web, and specifically NFTs. I think in the bull market of 21 and early 2022, community was such a buzzword, and it was trite and cliche, but it was also, we were seeing the power of community, and there is, again, a lot of power. But now with the hindsight of a couple of years, and both myself trying to run a community as well as watching other ones, I realize, and just learning more about business, like this is my first company, my first time, being a founder of anything. So I've learned a ridiculous amount over the last 2 years, all the mistakes I've made. I realize now that, community is such a double-edged sword. And, a lot of the most successful projects out there, they don't have a community, or they built a company first and then a community formed. And that I think is the path forward for a lot of people. For others, community first does make sense, but it really is it depends situation.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And, I think the thing that you said earlier about managing expectations is the part that probably gets lost the most with folks that don't really understand what that community really represents. Because when you start feeling like it's a we, then when you do something that's not what the we wanted, everyone wants to kill you. Right? Like,
yeah. And so I wrote this article, God, maybe like 18 months ago, a while ago now, titled Impossible Expectations, which is, when you really think about it, it is literally impossible to live up to the expectations of your community, because I mean, a multitude of things is happening, but for just at the base level, let's say you have 1,000 members of your community, let alone 5,000 or 10,000. That's 1,000 different human beings, and they all have different expectations. So some of them are going to be there because they want the floor price to go up. Or even if you don't have a floor price, some of them are going to be there because they want help in the short term about X, Y, or Z. And then some people are there because they believe in the long term vision. And some people like the art, and some people like X, Y. And then if you add floor price in, some people will have minted, some people will have bought at 10x the floor price, and all everything in between. And you just can't make everybody happy, and it's all done in public. So I think trying to make everybody happy is just right off the bat the wrong approach, and that's,
Yeah.
I think, where a lot of projects have failed.
Great takeaway though. I think GCI, remember, like, the state of the art is not necessarily your art, right? Like, it's just that the things that there, you got to mix these things the right way. Well, thanks for those answers. I want to chat a little bit about culture now, I guess. Let's move to our second topic. You have been I would say, a master at using and leveraging social media as well throughout this process, right? Everything from Discord, obviously, to Twitter, your newsletter, and other tools like that. And, Web3, almost, you could argue, like, was created and propagated like through so much of like what even like crypto Twitter is probably like the most powerful force relative, like, next to Discord, right? Or your own Discord or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess, what are your takeaways now that you've done it? And, I guess and I'm going to ask you to try to telegraph something that's hard to do, because the worst part about advice about social from people who are successful with it is that when they were successful was like historical, right? It's like seeing a star, right? And so, you need like that leading edge, that live edge, to really know like what it takes to be successful. So I know, like, there's some fundamentals, of course, and I'm happy for you to share those. But I guess, what are you seeing now also that's connecting, that part of that experience or part of that skill set that our brands and founders need to develop?
Yeah. Social media is such a funny and fickle thing, because you're exactly right. The landscape changes, the algorithm changes, the community in the space, everything is constantly in flux and constantly changing. When I was growing my personal brand and the companies, it was like bull market 21, not that many other people out there. As I said before, the bar was very low. I didn't have to do anything, in my view, exceptional. It was just a lot of showing up and being reasonable and posting content regularly. Now there's a lot more competition. It's a lot harder to stand out from the crowd. There's a lot more noise involved. Um, However, I mean, I'm working on a personal branding course right now. I'm helping people in Zen Academy build out their own personal. So I'm sort of like, I feel like I'm staying up to date with what is necessary. And it's just reinforcing my long-term hatred of social media. I've never been a fan of it. And it's very ironic, given I've grown a large platform on social media, but I really do hate social media and what it represents in our world. However, I've learned to look at it as a tool that can be used for good, for evil, and consume people, or you can be consumed by it, or you can not be consumed by it. And I think fundamentally, the number one most important thing that I see that was true 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, is true now, and I think will continue to be true, is that you have to provide value, and B, you have to be genuine. People appreciate genuine humans sharing their experience and knowledge with a desire to help others. That's to me the critical thing when it comes to growing on social media, whether it's a personal thing or a company brand or whatever your sort of goals are. There's a big asterisk here, because you can, of course, and we all know examples of people that have grown massive accounts without being genuine. They just post memes, or they just shit post, or they use the latest and greatest engagement farming tips and tricks and hacks, and you can just tell that their posts are like they're at the cutting edge of how the algorithms work and all that kind of stuff. And that can work. I just don't personally believe in that approach, especially if you think of it as long-term brand building. You can min-max your engagement and get a lot of views and maybe make a bunch of money. And like, it really depends on what your goals are. But if your goals are to build something substantive of value that lasts the long term, and that people, will have a good impression of, and want to tell their friends about, and like resonate with, you need to give value. You need to connect with people on a human level, but by being genuine. And being relatively consistent is important, which is another thing I hate about social media. It tends to punish taking breaks and take 2 weeks off and you come back in the algorithm. So like, but you can find ways around that by like, every once a week, maybe you post something, or there are other, YouTube is less punishing than Twitter, and I could
Yeah.
continue down a rabbit hole, but like
It's interesting
those are
because
the fundamentals.
when I hear you describing social, a lot of those attributes align with, I guess, building a great community. Can you point the difference out though? Right? Like, because I think a lot of folks mistake, like, because they're building on a social platform, like say Twitter, that they're building a community. That's not necessarily the same thing, right? Like,
No,
can you point out
it's
that
not.
difference a bit?
This gets back to what I said before about like if you're building it, like let's use Twitter as an example, or even YouTube. All of what I just said is growing an audience. It's not community building. It's putting content out to the world that people appreciate and value, and that will help you grow an audience. But then, in order to turn that into a community, you need to provide a place for those people to connect with one another, and that's where like the Discord piece comes into play. Or it could be a Patreon, or it could be a Telegram, or it could be IRL meetups. Or I've seen people build communities on Slack, and it's like, pick your place, but you need a place for the community to get to know one another. Otherwise, it's just like one-way street where it's creator and consumer, and you need to have like the people consuming the content engage with one another. That's where the whatever Discord or something comes in.
Yeah, it's the many to many aspects, right? Like, it feels like
Yes,
you
exactly.
have liftoff when you are not the accelerant to all activity, right? Like, or the kindling for all
Yes.
activity, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about hating social, and it's actually a good, I guess, segue to kind of my second question. I know you did a post recently about like friend tech and some of these other things. And to me, it feels like decentralized social has sort of been like this white whale for the Web3 community. We're starting to see some movement, like you have Lens and you have CyberConnect and other platforms like that. I think finally kind of getting a bit more motion. But I guess like, can you like maybe unpack like, are you a fan of it? Like, what do you think is the opportunity of a decentralized kind of social platform, social network? And of course, and then I guess the second part is, what do you think is holding it back, right? Like, why hasn't it taken off?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of decentralized social. I think it is the future. I think it is necessary. I think it is good for humanity. I think it's very, very good. I think it's necessary. And the reason is that what we have currently is very largely centralized social. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have TikTok, pick your poison. There's a handful of massive, massive corporations that effectively own the social media space. And what that means is they change their algorithms, and that dictates, there's been a million cases of, a massive YouTube creator or someone running ads on Facebook, and then something changes and all of a sudden their business drops 90%. Or the less extreme example is, if like, I'll use myself an example. I have a lot of followers on Twitter, but if I were to try and start a YouTube channel or to grow a LinkedIn page, it is extraordinarily difficult to get my followers from Twitter to follow me on another platform. And this is true for someone who has a lot of Instagram followers, trying to get them over to Twitter, or because inherently these platforms, they don't want to send business off platforms. So what they do is they punish links to external sites. They don't let you post. They don't let anybody see them, and that kind of stuff. And then they just ban your account for one reason or another, which has happened all over the place. And that's why you see so many people building up email lists and having newsletters, because that's the creator own their distribution list, and they can't get quote unquote rugged by a big social media giant. Decentralized social gives that power back to individuals, where anyone could build. Let's say in a hypothetical world, if Twitter was currently decentralized and people weren't liking the direction Elon was taking it in, you could effectively fork it, and someone could just say, all right, now just move to this new platform. You've still got all your followers and everyone's there, and we just build a new platform that lives on top of Twitter, and things like that, and become a lot more possible. And I think that is really, really necessary. And you go to the whole censorship debate and other things as well, but decentralized social, I think, is really important for the world. And I think it will be the future. The reason it hasn't taken off yet is network effects. It's, so incredibly difficult to, take power away from an existing social network. There's every person who's a part of that network is in many ways incentivized to continue to be part of that network because they build a followership there. And things like Lens, things like Farcaster, there's a bunch that are taking strides in that direction. And I think we just need time before they eventually take over and be the dominating form of social media in the world.
I always laugh at the people complaining about, social platforms. Like they go on Twitter to complain about Twitter, right? Like, so you're absolutely right though. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to basically liberate any like molecule, right? So
we saw with Threads when Meta launched their competitor, there was so much excitement, and they have 1 billion. I think Instagram uses 1.6 billion, and it still didn't work. Like they still couldn't make it work. So what hope does anyone else have if not just let's give them another decade?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Well, it's actually a good segue to our next segment, like section on code, right? Like, I guess, more of the fundamental technologies of Web3 and, like all of the Web3 things are built, are significantly built on this blockchain, and the technology, unfortunately, has proven, complex and confusing, let's say, right? And I think you're right. Like, sort of network effects have been hard for us to sort of get there. How do you see that pain easing, I guess, right? A lot of, kind of that maxi mindset was just like kind of like shoving it in your face in the past, right? I feel like we're transitioning kind of away from that. Like, no, you have to show a wallet and connect it for you to use Web3. Like, we have a lot of brands, a lot of builders here. Like, how do you what is your encouragement, I guess, for them or advice, right? Relative to sort of the technology itself. And more importantly, how do you interface that technology to your community and, to your customer base, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, there's no denying there's a lot of friction involved when trying to interact with a blockchain today. However, it's better than it's ever been. It's way better than it was in 21. It's miles better than it was in 2017 when I was first dabbling. Eon's better than 2011 when I first heard about Bitcoin. It's like, it just gets better as time goes on, and it's only going to get better from here. And so I think that, everyone always talks about, we need to go quote unquote mainstream. When are we going to onboard the next billion and et cetera? And another article I wrote probably about 18 months ago as well is sort of how do we make that happen? And there's sort of three things I sort of identify. One is education, and that's just continually putting out high quality education and guides to help people on board. But I think that's a relatively minor element compared to improved UI and UX and just having the experience be seamless. And, it took a while for people to be able to interact with the internet and with computers. And I remember in the late 90s, I was, helping show one of my aunts how to use a mouse for a computer and like all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, people just did, and now we have iPads and iPhones, and a 3-year-old kid can understand it in 10 minutes, and it's just intuitive and simple and safe. And we just need time and we're getting there. We're getting frictionless, seamless applications and safety rails and all that. It's coming. It's just, it takes time. And the third piece was a mentality shift, because a lot of people still hate crypto and just hate blockchains inherently without truly understanding it out of ignorance. So all of this is coming. It just takes time. And I think that for brands and companies that are building like right now and maybe don't have 5 years to wait and trying to address it right now, it's think about who your target market and audience is and what their level of knowledge is and how can you best help them. And so like if you market as crypto natives, then you don't really have to do that much.
Right.
If your market is, the rest of the world, do you need them to be your target market right now, or can you market to the crypto natives? And if you do need to be, then you just set up like a really easy, people can use a credit card or like a how-to guide or like 3-click steps. Like there's a lot more tooling now that you can make it happen and make it as simple and seamless as possible, and like hide away a lot of the tech and abstract it. And like Reddit and Starbucks, and there's some great example of companies that have done that.
Yeah, I like your point though about I would even tack on to the mentality thing. It's also like us from Web3 not being so protectionist about Web3 itself, right? Like, so, it's everyone's place to spoil, I guess, right? And so like, let folks like experiment and try things, because, if we chastise like new use cases or new experiments, then we don't evolve, right?
Yeah. I mean,
in the
just
way
getting
that we
back to
talk.
like the decentralized social and friend tech and stuff, a lot of people have come out and said how terrible friend tech is, and it's a Ponzi, and like, of course it's a Ponzi. 99% of crypto is a Ponzi. It's just like, let's be real. That doesn't mean it's inherently bad. It's
Mhm.
experimenting, and
Right.
it's moving us. It's, there's a lot more people today working on decentralized social and social finance than there were 6 months ago, and I think a large part is because of friend tech. And one of those companies will probably come up with the use case, the application layer that actually cracks it and makes it. And um, as long as, I mean, they're not like rugging people. It's very clear and transparent how
Yeah.
it works, and it's a free market. And just because people are going to lose money and some people will make money, it's not inherently bad. So I think
The-
experimentation, to your point, is exactly what we need.
yeah. I guess continuing that thought, I guess, what are the tools that you think, if you were encouraging, or you had your magic wand and you're like, you knew like 100 founders, you know 100 founders are out there right now, right? Like, or builders, like, what were the tools you would encourage them to be looking at or thinking about building, like based on kind of our current state of things?
It's so hard to answer that question. I've had a variety of answers in the past. I mean, a floor price tracking tool was my answer in 2021 when we just didn't have that. Now we have a lot of that. I still think like we need like a Wikipedia for Web3. That
Mm.
a lot of people are trying to build that and different approaches, and it's not really. We don't have this one go-to repository for like everything about Web3 yet. I think that would be cool. I think that kind of has to be a community effort. Um, I think a lot of it's about just solving a real problem. I think there's too many people building things that no one wants and no one asks for. I think not enough founders are asking the right questions early enough, the tough questions early enough, um, and they end up getting a lot of like just yes men or yes people responding saying, "Oh, that's a great idea. Keep going. Yeah, yeah, I love that." And I think there's this great book called The Mum Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. I think that I recommend everyone reads, and it's about how to get good customer feedback and start from day one or day zero, and don't spend 18 months building a product and then go to market and be like, "Hey guys, do you want this?" That's not the right approach.
Yeah, I think that, Web3, like to your point, actually, you're making earlier about like knowing who the target audience is. I think you get a lot of false positives if you focus on Web3 also, right?
Yes.
Because, like we're all maxi, like we're all activists here, right? Like we're
We're in
gonna
an echo
like
chamber.
try to make everything work, right? Like,
Yeah.
but getting beyond, the safety of the Web3 ecosystem or community is usually, you're either betting that the community will expand, and I think we've seen that there's a lot of challenges in that. Hopefully we'll overcome some of them, and obviously bull and bear markets tend to, sort of have their own impact on that. But I think the bigger part is the next billion people may take a dozen years, right? Like for that to be
Yeah.
true. And so, if you are thinking about markets outside, and I think that's a great point though, is just identify that real market first, right? Like don't make it Web3 because it's an easy market to talk to, let's say. And honestly, it's not that easy. You still got to do a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But I do think, yeah, not knowing your market really important. And I think like a lot of brands make this mistake also, where they jump in, they think like Web3 represents some new liquidity for them, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the case either, right? Like, I mean, like your fans that overlap are there, but like that's kind of almost like the wrong point of view, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of short-term thinking there where
yeah,
I feel like the brands that approach Web3 the wrong way are, like you say, they think, oh, there's some liquidity there, let's launch a product, let's try and make a few $1 million. And especially for like the larger brands, that's like irrelevant to them and
yeah,
their balance sheet. The right approach should be, how can we use this technology to bolster the rest of our business and enhance the offering we have for the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of customers we have. And again, bringing it back to Starbucks, I think is a pretty great example of how they're approaching it with a long term mindset. But there's been a bunch of other examples of
yeah,
companies approaching it with that in mind. The problem with the short term thinking or the revenue drive, and I get that every company needs to obviously think about revenue and how any new initiative, and there's risk involved with Web3 and all that kind of stuff. But I think people are thinking of it in like a 1 or 2 year time scale, and really you got to have a 5-10 year outlook because it's
yeah.
it's a new version of the internet. Like, it took how long for the internet to take off, and social media, it took
It
a while
feels like
before
it
it
was
was a
instant,
mainstay.
right? But
It feels like it, but yeah, God,
I was there in the 90s. Yeah, it was not
yeah,
instant.
it was not. And then, I mean, it was even that, like, go back another decade in the 80s, it was still, it existed, but it wasn't even like consumer level. And then
Yeah.
obviously the world has changed, and it is
Yeah.
a lot more fast now, but it still needs time.
And I think you made a great point though, because one of the problems with people have heard me speak. I say this all the time. Like, I think all innovation is driven by like technology and culture, right? I think the more interesting, compelling part about Web3 is not the technology; it's the culture part, right?
Yeah.
And the problem that large companies tend to have is that culture doesn't scale, right? And so they tend to like things that scale, right? Like with meaningful impact. And so like community doesn't scale, right? Culture doesn't scale, right? Like relationships don't scale, right? And so when they look at Web3, it's really biting that apple that's going to give you that success, right? Not sort of like the maneuvering and the scheming, and all the shilling that goes on, right? I don't think brands should ever play that game if they want to, have any longevity in mind, right?
Yeah.
Let's move to our next topic about currency. I know I saw your tweets recently going on, about the funniest one to me was just like, when you hear everyone talking about Bitcoin, it's time to sell.
It's so true.
But coins are going up and down. And there was, I was a Rally coin holder, right? Owner. I guess, do you see these like currencies sort of still having relevancy, kind of in this age, or is it, is it really just, is it falling out? Is there like currency? There's, utility tokens, and then there's like, some loyalty tokens maybe, but are those three buckets aren't all the same per se, right? Like, what do you see happening in the coin space itself, or, and relative to leveraging these tokens?
Yeah, you're all good questions, and I think that they're clearly not the same. They can be the same, and I would say that Bitcoin is a good example of a store of value / currency, where it is, even although now the ordinals, there's a little more debate about what it's being used for, but largely people consider it as a store of value and a currency, and it's sort of stabilizing and I think increasingly being used as currency. Ether is a bit of that plus utility. You can do stuff with it. It's now become a lot more utility and just doing things and powering all these applications and use cases and blockchains and DeFi and all that kind of stuff. And then loyalty is it's kind of baked into everything. And there's occasionally coins that are full loyalty, but usually it's some element of all three. I think that the reality is, in my view, that like we don't need 99.99% of the coins out there. I think, and it's true, the price reflects that. Like the market cap is largely pulled to like a small handful at the top, especially once you remove stable coins and things like that. And I think people generally should think of it that way. Like Bitcoin and ETH, let's just say the big two, are for sure, in my view, in people that have conviction, going to be here. We could even take out ETH and just say Bitcoin, but like I have very strong conviction in ETH as well. The rest, you are taking additional risks and basically just gambling one way or another. Is this still going to be viable in a decade? Is it still going to be sensible? Is it going to get superseded? The network effects aren't necessarily there with a lot of them. They're a lot more riskier. Basically, to answer your question, I think the coin space is fascinating, but my advice to almost everyone is stick to Bitcoin and ETH and allocate a small percentage to gamble and speculate on other coins. And there is good money to be made, but it's extraordinarily risky. And most people, like 95% of people, will lose money trading. And the funny thing, though, is that 80% of people think that they can make money trading and that they can beat the market. And the reality is that almost
it's like the Dunning-Kruger thing, right? Like,
exactly.
But so would you also, if I'm hearing you right, would you also then like kind of advocate, like, much like you may not need a community, you probably don't need a coin, right?
Oh yeah, project.
You
just almost never release a token.
Right.
Just don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Good.
And honestly, I increasingly believe that NFTs as well as like that, they're just tokens as well. I mean, it's literally
Yeah.
there in the word, just
Yeah.
because they're non-fungible.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that almost always they do more harm than good, both
Yeah, I hear
fungible
you.
and non-fungible tokens.
I would say, part of like philosophically what I saw, like why I think Rick Rowley had a really hard time, much like you were describing about communities, was that disaligned incentives, right, causes problems, right? So like, for example, if you're trying to use a token for loyalty, it's very problematic that people are trading it, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not a thing that should be like, it's a thing that you accrue, but it's not necessarily a thing you trade, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so the people who are there because they support you and they want to be there and they've been participating and playing along and contributing, they get shafted like because of speculators in whales, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I think like these ethical kind of questions, philosophical questions around this, on that, in that tact, right? I would say like, what do you feel about this? Like, much like a friend tech and things like this, what are your thoughts on the like monetizing personal relationships, right? So to some degree, part of like what decentralized social brings with it is sort of some kind of like personal economics as well, right? Like, and I'm kind of curious, like how do you see that space or that part of the space? But more importantly, I guess now as an educator and trying to like sort of like onboard people in the right way, how do you give them the right mindset to think about what these mean? Because it's very hard to not have. I'm a founder. When my startup is doing bad, like I feel like crap, right? Like, and well, guess what? If I had some kind of like stock ticker attached to my my soul, like I would feel even
Yeah.
crappier if it was getting dumped, right? So, what's your kind of take on this emerging kind of part of like DSO and I think like what we see sort of being gamified a little bit right now.
I mean, I hate it. I think it's however, I think it's not that different to my hatred towards social media in general. Because I think that yes, we're moving towards like with Friend Tech or with Stars Arena or with any of these platforms, there's like the financial element that's very directly tied to like you said, a ticket price goes up and down on your literally to call a ticket price in one of them, or your key price in the other is I mean, that's very visceral and in your face, but even take that away, we've got for a decade plus social media, the number of followers you have, the number of likes you get on a post, people are already feeling emotionally connected to, oh, nobody liked my post. Oh, wow, look, I got 100 likes. I feel great. And like, um, and the more followers you have, there is more monetary upside to that. You just have more opportunities. You can make more money if you have a lot of followers, and so we're already moving in that direction. This is just an acceleration of that, and a visceral level of that. And I think that to sort of play devil advocate to myself, I think there's an optimistic view where in a decentralized social world, we can grab some power back and have a little more autonomy where you have more control over just the entire ecosystem. The biggest problem I think is like the I think our brains just aren't designed to think about this in a logical, rational way. Our emotions get involved. Like you said, if
For
you're a
sure.
founder, if your company's doing well, you feel great. If it's not doing well, you feel terrible. I think that's very true of most founders. Um, and first time founders like myself and speaking to others, like it's a struggle the first many years, first company, first
Yeah.
business. But after 15, 20 years, you probably get experience and you build up your defenses. And I think that most people are not used to the idea of their worth or their just like their basically their worth to the market being just traded and
Yeah.
put on display. And I think it's just like all social media, going to be harmful to humanity's psyche. At least for a while, the optimist in me again thinks and hopes that we come up with good ways to battle this, because ultimately it's not good or bad for the world. It's a tool, it's a product, it's a technology. It's how we use it and how we respond to it, and we
Yeah.
all have to do that on an individual level. And I think education can sort of, I mean, like education about mental health and philosophy and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff can really help combat it. it's interesting. It's really is
It's
fascinating.
not that we can't push the boulder up the hill. It's just that usually no one wants to, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that is part of the challenge, right? Is human nature is well worn and defined, and so these kinds of behaviors tend to replicate themselves. And I think you're right, though, right? Like to succeed in reinventing that, we have to put forth models for it. I think that's relevant for brands as well, right? Like if you just reward based on transactions, that is not a whole view of your customer, right? Of your advocate, of a community member, whatever it may be. And so, when you design your programs, like you should think about how to design it in a way that not just a certain elite set of people, if that's not your goal, right? Then like make sure you're thinking about that and how to be more equitable in the process. We have our last C, but I had 2 questions. I'm going to just do one because I know we're running short on time. We have some good questions here as well. So the last question I'll ask is, I guess when you mentioned non-fungible tokens, NFTs, right? And I think, they while everything has a good and a bad side, I think they can spawn a tremendous amount of like negative things. What are the positive ways that you think like NFTs and collectibles, you launch one for your community, right? But how can we use them to like enhance the relationship between us and our community and our customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to answer this. I think NFTs are, again, a technology. NFTs are like websites. They're like URLs. They're like email. You could use them in a million different ways. And some of the best ways of people using them, I think, are artists and people selling digital art in a way that was literally not possible and is not possible without NFT technology. And that's just amazing to see. People utilize the technology. People appreciate art. They collect and can have this relationship with the artist. I think for brands and companies, it can create this deeper connection to customers, fans, community members, where in some intangible sense, they are financially invested without being an investor. But there's usually a deeper emotional connection where you own an asset that's digital. And it's just like, why do movies sell toys? Because kids will buy them and adults will buy them, and they like to have them on their desk or in their room, and they resonate with the brand, and they want to show people, hey, I like this brand, I have this connection to them. That breeds super fans, and that's great, and it's revenue for the company. Same thing, but just digital assets. And now our lives are increasingly going in the digital worlds. People are spending billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars every year on video games and in-game items and assets. And so people are already spending money in virtual worlds. So NFTs, again, are just the natural extension of that. It's just that the technology has not caught up where it's seamless and easy to use and sensible. But yeah, I don't think it's it's weird. Like on the one hand, I don't feel like we need to convince people because people are already spending money. It's just we need to sort of make it so that it just happens automatically and it's seamless.
I love that idea, and I think it's a really important point. I hope folks don't gloss over it. That I think you said 2 things that really stood out to me just now. One is that that people are investing. They may not be financially investing, but it's important to sort of recognize that investment is meaningful to them, right? And and I think relatedly, like what triggers in my mind about that is that find ways to celebrate moments, right? Like to create moments, use the NFTs can be a wonderful way for appreciating, commemorating. And if we use that more and more for that purpose, it starts to take away this like financialized incentive and sort of moves us to this like participatory incentive. And that's a good thing, I think, right?
100%.
And yeah, absolutely. We should have way more automatic versions of this than not just all of this like hoop jumping that exists. We had a couple questions. I'll try to pose them really quickly. Mirrorworks from YouTube was asking, as a fashion product brand navigating the Web3 space, I find it difficult to differentiate between building a community versus building loyal customers. Is there a difference for you for a company like this?
It's a good question. I think there is a difference. And again, it's that same thing where you can have loyal customers which are great. And maybe that's all you want. The difference is that once those customers start interacting with each other, that's when you get the community. The thing that comes to mind when I think of fashion and a company with community and loyal customers is 9DCC. They're a metaverse physical fashion brand. They've got loyal customers, but they also have a community. And I think it's working really well for them. But I think you can absolutely be a metaverse fashion product brand, without a community. You just sell really good products and people like them and love them and tell their friends about them. And it's just like they post them on social media and they use them, or they just keep buying themselves. And that's fine, because it is a ton of work to also build a successful, profitable company that sells products and has customers, and build a community alongside it. And I think of the two, I would focus 100% on customers. Like, if you're trying to build a business, you need to make money. You can always add the community element later. If you have the capacity right now, if someone on the team is really passionate about building community and has experience, or just wants to do it and can take it on, and it's not going to distract from the survivability of the company, then great. Like, it's really worth trying to do as well. But get loyal customers, and then you can easily turn them into a community. It's way harder. Well, it is harder to turn a community into loyal customers in a way.
Yeah, and I would add that if you are curious about this dynamic, go find an actual community for a brand that you actually like. Think about the communities that you're in because of the brand that you actually love. I bet you it's very few and far between in the traditional world. There's probably a lot more of that resonance in the Web3 world. But if you want to see examples of what holds it together, then there are ways to see this, right? And I think the best brands, regardless of Web 2, Web 3, whatever it's going to be, they recognize that people aren't just their purchases, but there's this persona and this lifestyle that sort of exists around it. And ultimately tapping into that is what helps the community form. It's not, I collect sneakers, but I'm not on Nike's site. I'm on a site with other collectors, right? Like talking to people, because we care about all these other random little things that Nike just doesn't usually talk about, right?
100%. I wanted to recommend this book. It's called Get Together, because you got it there as well. There's a sort of a great example in it, I think, talking about Harley Davidson and how they have
the toolkit, right?
There you go. They've got a tremendous community. But it is definitely rarer and harder to think about those companies that have them outside of the Web3 space. So, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. So we'll do one more question. So Troop Labs was asking, how do you create a strong community that is not driven by speculation?
Don't give them something to speculate on. Don't sell an NFT. Don't release a token. Don't give them something to speculate on. Some of the strongest communities are just free avenues, or just have like a $10 a month, $50 a month monthly subscription that the price is not going to go up or down. It's just they're part of the community. They're paying because they like the community. They want to be there. The easiest way to create a strong community that is not driven by speculation is don't give them something to speculate on. And most of the times, almost always, a community that's driven on speculation is not a strong community, or if it is, it's temporarily a strong community, because as soon as the market turns and the bubble bursts, that we've seen that happen 1,000 times in the last 2 years, community dissipates and it's no longer a strong community. And so if you take away the element of speculation, that's the easiest way to do it. The other way is just be very upfront about the fact that you're not doing it for money or floor price or speculation or, under promise, and just like focus on other initiatives. And that's kind of what we've tried to do at Zen Academy, is like, as much as possible, don't talk about the token price, the floor price, or why you're doing things for that reason, and just try and build a strong community. But again, the easiest way is just don't have a token.
Yeah. I love that. Cause the old way used to be like forcing people to grind and get in, join the Discord to get access. That's exactly precisely what's setting up that bad behavior. By the way, if you want a rule of thumb, go look at how many active online people you have versus members. When that number gets out of whack, you'll know that you've probably tip too far in the wrong direction, you might want to take some corrective action. I will recommend, by the way, one of our members in the CPG Accelerator Telegram group had a great post, Mac Badowski. And he talks about this idea of like speculation market fit, which is like sort of this like, unfortunate side effect of the market that a lot of founders felt like they had to offer speculation as a way to sort of like be successful. Great post. I gave it a read yesterday. And I highly recommend that everyone check it out. Zen, it's been a great chat. Like, I know we covered a lot of stuff, and I appreciate you talking on your feet. But also like, just some really great answers. Like, cause I feel, I feel like everyone feels like it's on all of the above strategy all the time. And I don't think that that's really the case. And I'm glad you pointed out so many ways that folks have choices that they should make and can make to like decide on how to be successful. And your best chance is going to be figuring out the right choices to make, right? Over time. 100%. I will, if you're all of you listening, we do have a POAP for today. So if you want to celebrate catching this chat today, you have 72 hours. The secret phrase is denizens. Head over to the POAP word, type it in and go pray that you don't screw up too many times trying to count to 100. But you can claim this POAP for the next 72 hours, even if you're listening now, not live or recorded. And do remember that to be CPG certified, you need to collect a certain number of these. So on that, I will say thank you so much, Zen. It's been a pleasure to be here and chatting. To everyone in the accelerator, best of luck, keep building, and we will see you on Thursday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.